All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you and welcome to Holo and Holochain Ask Me Anything AMA number 22. It is Thursday, February 8th. No, 7th. I'm getting ahead. I'm jumping into the future. My apologies. The structure for today, we're going to start with some intros, some thank yous, some announcements and updates. We're then going to dive into some frequently asked questions and then get to the live AMAs, the questions that you guys are posing in the moment. All right, diving straight in. Tremendous gratitude to our community leaders, volunteers, contributors, and organizers. Thank you for gifting the community with your hard work, whether it's creating developer resources, chat moderation, and community engagement, organizing events, or helping us share our story on social media, various online channels, or in real life. I'd also like to send out a special message to all of our communities that are celebrating their new year. Happy Lunar Chinese New Year. 2019 is the year of the pig. We hope that 2019 brings you abundance and prosperity, your belly stuffed, wallet full of red envelopes, and heart bursting with love and joy. Some quick intros for the folks that are on the call today. I'm Matthew Schutte, the Director of Communications. I'm here with Mary Camacho, our Executive Director for Holo, as well as David Atkinson, the Commercial Director for Holo. Some announcements. We have several events and meetups scheduled for the first quarter of 2019. ETHDenver is going to be February 15th through 17th. We'll be participating in that. Our third DevCamp, online DevCamp, number 3, is planned for February 18 through 22nd. You can register at holo.host/camp, and we'll put that link into the chat as well. The Melbourne Meetup, which is organized by community members, will be on February 19th in Melbourne, Australia. The New York City Meetup is happening on February 25th at 6 p.m. We'll drop that link into the chat as well. And the Barcelona Meetup is happening on February 27th. Again, we'll be dropping links into the chat for all of those. If you'd like to join a meetup community, look for a city or region-specific channel on our chat channel at chat.holochain.org. If you don't find one, you can organize your own. We recommend starting by first creating a chat channel for your city or region, and then be sure to announce it on the announcements channel. We'd also be happy to help connect you with other organizers and to provide guidance where needed. Please email events@holo.host. Again, that's events@holo.host. Eric Bear will be happy to help you get started. A few words before we dig into the questions. Mary, can you give us a little bit of an update on some of the stuff we've been sharing recently in our blog?
You bet. Hi, everyone, and welcome again to today's AMA. So if you've been reading some of the Holo posts lately, we've been talking a little bit about something different, the cryptographic autonomous license. It's gone through a couple of iterations. And it's the license that we're actually going to be using for Holochain. So I just wanted to kind of call attention to that real quickly. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail here because that's all already in the posts. But what I really want to say about this is, it's a lot like standard open source licenses, which makes sense for what we're creating here in the sense that you can use and distribute it. But what's so distinctive and that I just want to make sure that everybody keeps hearing is that this is the first time you're seeing a software license that includes a protection for end users. And that is completely, it's completely innovative, and it's what we think really defines open. So if you have questions about that tonight, let us know. We're happy to take them and try to get you answers about it if it comes up.
Yeah, and for those who aren't familiar, you can get to our blog and all of those posts by going, the easiest way is holo.host, and then click the blog link. Okay, diving straight into our FAQs, questions that people have been posing to us in the last couple of weeks in Telegram, Reddit, our chat channels on Mattermost, etc. First up, what does it take to build a truly decentralized and distributed internet where users own their data? Can the team explain what that looks like on Holochain? Mary, do you want to take this one?
Well, I'll take a stab at it. So I'm sure I'm not going to answer all of what's wanted in this question, but let's just start to get on the same page and make sure we go over a little bit what Holochain is, then what Holo is, and also for good measure, we'll tack on at the end what HoloPorts are. I know most of you guys listening to this know it, but I think it's important to distinguish. So Holochain is a framework for building applications, for creating and actually running those applications. It's a data integrity engine for distributed apps. And that means it enables patterns required for distributed applications where the users are the focus and where the data is inherently associated to a user. That's my version in a nutshell of Holochain. Holo is a distributed cloud hosting platform that works as a marketplace where one side is the hosts and the other side is the developers or the publishers of apps. And Holo is much more than a marketplace, though. It enables, or what it allows is for Holochain apps, which inherently aren't reliant on a network or a specific form of network, rather, but it allows Holochain applications to connect to the current version of the internet. So it gives a bridge, so to speak, so that people who prefer self-hosting on one hand can connect within an application to people who may not yet care about the distributed side of it, may not have it installed, but can access through a browser. So regardless of whether a user is accessing a Holochain app directly installed or self-hosted or via a web browser, they have control of their own seeds and their keys such that they are really, truly controlling their identity and their own data. So I know that wasn't really the question, sorry. But what does it take to build it? That's awesome question. We're working to make these things easier and easier for developers to build the apps on Holochain and to have that data integrity. Part of that is developing what we call core apps, and these include things like Deep Key, as well as personas and other modules that people can use directly in different applications. Also, we're building what we're calling core components, and these are more generalized snippets, components that can be used in different ways. For example, the same data component you might use for a chat message could also be used in a comment section on a site. And what's important about this is to really get that this is a bit the back end side of your stack. On the front end, you can still build in all the business logic you want for using any form of web application tool set that you really like. So if you're a React developer, build it in React. That's great. It really is that we're not limiting the entire front to back stack. We're saying that we're this data integrity engine that is both distributed and able to connect to the internet.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. The next question we have is, will a node be blacklisted if an error occurs in data storage? I'll go ahead and take this one. So first off, quality of service is going to be tracked in the closed alpha that we're about to do, but minimally and without consequences. The closed alpha is for Holo, our peer-to-peer web hosting marketplace. We're about to take our first steps in doing a little bit of a trial. There will be a limited group of people that are using it. So quality of service tracking, how good a job each node is doing, is going to be minimal at first. There's still work and thought to be put into this area, but ultimately, a single storage corruption or transmission error should not greatly harm a node's reliability metrics. As that part of Holo matures, or quality of service metrics, it'll work like this. As a node's history of low quality or poor reliability increases, right? If this node is really doing a poor job consistently, the node's tranche assignment will be affected. In other words, they'd earn a poor reputation. And particular purchasers of hosting services may choose not to make use of it because they only want to rely upon hosts in higher tranches, hosts that have built a certain reputation for reliability. Now that pattern can be reversed if whatever hardware or software problems that have been causing that poor reliability are rectified, or in other words, if this host starts to demonstrate that they are consistently delivering good service. But that's the basic gist. So will a single error result in you being booted entirely? No, but we're trying to create mechanisms that enable feedback so that our community can better sense and steer. All right, third question. Which version of the Linux kernel is Holo using? This is a deeply geeky question. We'll try to do it quickly. On the HoloPort and HoloPort Plus, we're currently using the stable release of Nixos 18.09, which is pegged to Linux 4.14.97. On the Nano, we're working with kernel 4.20-RC7, which will move to a stable release 4.20.7, most likely next week. These kernel versions will move forward to at least track with security releases. All right, next up. This is framed in standard Telegram ease. Win roadmap with dates. Win mainnet. Why are there no dates on the milestone map? Mary, do you want to take this one?
Okay, sure. This question comes up all the time. And the thing is, creating real innovation is a very complex path filled with twists and turns, guys. It's in every software, hardware project, especially with networking, it has complexities and it takes time. A roadmap that has those dates, you know, stretching out into the future with all of them lined up with months and days associated to them, it might feel great. But if it's only a wish list rather than like a real guide and accurate guidance on expectations, that's not really useful. And for us, we're really seeking to be trustworthy in how we communicate this. We've done some forecasts in the past already. I mean, for example, with HoloPort delivery, and we didn't hit it. It doesn't feel good for us, and it doesn't feel good for our stakeholders. So we've learned from that. We're going to try to avoid that. We know it's a standard mistake. People demand dates, companies provide them. But usually that doesn't work well. It kind of creates pressure on the inside to create solutions that aren't as good. And what we're committed to is having high quality solutions when we deliver them. So we are basically, we are communicating what we are confident about. And that's the sequence of events and releases that we've shared so far. And become more confident on the delivery dates for each step, we will communicate those. We are confident at this point about our, delivering the Holo closed alpha testnet beginning this month. And that's what we've shared, and that's what we're going to begin doing later this month. And later this month, we'll probably have some more details about what's coming after that. But it's really going to be an iterative path for us.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. Next question. Does the org have a CEO? Is it Mary? Art? What is the organizational structure, philosophy, decision-making process? Nice, short, brief question. I'm going to throw this one back to you again, Mary.
Sure. I think I'm going to start at the bottom of this question and go backwards, rather. So decision-making happens with every person, in every team, in informal groups, within Holo and Holochain. And the reality is that the same human influence processes that work in families, schoolyards, companies, governments, they're all at play here, okay? As a company, Holo's incorporated in Gibraltar. I'm the executive director here, and David is officially our second director. We have formal and informal organizational structures and protocols, including an executive team, and that executive team is myself, David, and our founders, Arthur and Eric. Some of the ways we've looked at this is that we're, essentially we're birthing a product, and we're tending or gardening an ecosystem of applications. And our orientation to this, well, let me say this. Our orientation is different depending on who you ask to some degree, but in general is that we think it can't be done with simply a top-down decision-making. We have a strong orientation to self-directed work in collaborative and aligned settings. And we hope to move more and more and more of the governance of Holo, and especially Holochain, into decentralized mechanisms, but still being responsible for the ways that Holo is bridging to, you know, both to a distributed world and also to the current centralized world. So it's complex. We don't have the traditional hierarchical view, but there is leadership, and there are people who have say at different stages. But there's a lot of work happening all over the organization by people who are very, very much self-directed.
Just jump in for 1 second, because I get this question. I'd like to build on something Mary said. That it's always interesting to me in the decentralized world when people ask who is the CEO of the organization, because as we all know, we're here to build decentralized architecture, and one of the reasons for doing that is the resiliency of the architecture. And to build decentralized architecture and businesses and then have a single point of failure built in, like a CEO, seems like a very, very strange choice. Now, that we may end up with CEOs in one or many of our businesses, we may not, but it is an interesting way and an interesting framing of the question. And as Mary said, we've actually chosen to have an executive team model, which, while there is a concentration of decision-making there, it's one step already more resilient than having a CEO.
Thank you both. Okay, next question from Reddit. Do people really care about having control over their own data? If they own their own data, should they try to find ways to monetize it? David, you want to take this?
Sure. Yeah, we we do get this. Some of the folks in our community keep telling us that the popularity and ongoing popularity of Facebook and Google and their research indicate people don't really care whether or not they control their own data. But I disagree. People can dislike something and still participate in it. I think some of today's applications, they're a little bit akin to being in an abusive relationship. Yes, they're incredibly useful, and yes, we rely on them, but it doesn't mean we love everything about them, and it doesn't mean that a lot of them, of what we experience with them, is healthy. I think that the reality is that when people find that having access to and control over their own data lets them accomplish much more with less effort, it's going to lead to a significant shift. The second part of that question, should people try and monetize their data? I think it depends on the situation. What are they trying to do? Are they trying to give someone else access to their information? Are they giving someone control over what they see and what they won't see? In other words, are they losing control over their own life in a way that matters to them? Or are they gaining power, gaining control? The sort of loss of agency, of losing control, is widespread today, and it's very problematic. The fact that you might get paid a few dollars for such a huge loss of autonomy, it feels like a pretty poor trade-off. I think what we're experiencing is that people are relating to it as a direct trade-off, but there's so many compounding effects over this loss of autonomy and loss of control. It doesn't mean that sharing information is bad at all. It doesn't mean that getting paid to share information is a bad thing, but there are clearly situations where compensation gained won't come close to the actual costs incurred by the individual. So I think at the stage where we're just at the beginnings of understanding what this loss of control really means and what the opportunities are both to regain control and potentially benefit financially and non-financially from ownership of data.
I'd like to kind of throw a couple 2 cents in on this one too. You know, I get this concern. I really think it's valid because it's about adoption, right? I don't think that social media is necessarily the first big place where Holochain may be used. in that regard. I agree. There are a lot of people who seemingly, and we can try to speak to their motivations, and we may get it right or not, but they're not aware of, or they don't seem to care about giving their data away. You know, as David said, I do think also that the tides are probably changing on that. And what I think is important to note about Holochain on this is that we're poised to be ready for large social media apps on Holochain when that tipping point hits. And I still think it's going to take somebody creating the right social media app that does what people really want in the connection with others. That's what's important. And right now, where some of these current social media apps have done well is that they've given a particular experience of connecting to people that people wanted. And that's important to realize, because you certainly aren't going to make them go away by offering an application that doesn't meet those needs and more. Okay? So putting all that aside, I also think there's a lot of places where the benefits of Holochain are immediately useful in large ways. Data immutability is a pattern for applications that's very important for a lot of applications. I'm repeating myself here, but you know, in contrast to blockchain, Holochain really enables the development of, I don't know, real world, complex, fully scalable applications with user controlled and connected data that is immutable. Not just, I'm going to make a financial transaction and I want to know then, and I want everyone else to know that I just made that transaction. That's actually pretty straightforward. I'm talking about complex applications, things that are dealing with, like we talked about on the last AMA, like your medical records and services being provided, real estate, all sorts of different things that people are making interactions with, transactions on, that are not as straightforward as just, I'm sending somebody money. I think, kind of getting back to the other part of the question around compensation, around users using their data, I think it's going to be answered by the market and by people, right? And it has been so far. We can say that we're kind of holding people's arms behind their back, twisting them into doing that. But the reality is, if I go and I fill out a form where somebody's saying they're going to give away, you know, $1 million or a car or a trip, and I have to fill out my form and put it in a box with my information, I know that that is basically them paying me for that information, that I may not win that car, but I've basically, the opportunity to win that car is what I just got compensated with. The thing is the benefit, it comes in all different sorts of forms, and it's not always monetary. And that's going to continue to evolve in new patterns and new ways with Holochain, because not everything is money. And that's super important, because you can actually come up with new ways of we call it compensation, but that's making up for something, and I don't want to use that term in this point, but reputation is building something very important, and that's something that people will use. We were just describing that, how it was going to make a difference how hosts would be selected earlier, when Matt was talking about what happens when somebody's service degrades on their HoloPort. It can happen, and that will be about reputation. So it can have multiple effects, not these feedback loops. So I'm going on and on. I'll stop and move on to the questions that people are asking. But thanks for letting me chime in.
Thanks, Mary. We did have another sort of related question there. How can user data be utilized to be mutually beneficial for the end user and for the platform or app they're using? And Mary kind of touched on this quite a bit already in what her comments she just made. But David, do you want to say anything else on this particular tension?
Yeah, it's one I'm really passionate about, because with Holochain, we're seeking to find ways to enable people to enter into patterns of relationship that they find really healthy and vibrant and desirable. And this can take many forms. But there's one major pattern that I don't think anybody else has got right, that we're seeking to enable, which is one where an application is run by and for the users themselves. So think about that. That means that any of the applications you're running today that you love, imagine that you could also be running that application instead of them in server farms and all sorts of things. You could be part of the ecosystem by running the application. That's a huge shift, right? Huge shift away from the current paradigm where the owners of an application and the people that are using that application are separate. Its context will differ, but in general, there'll be many ways, given this shift, where the sharing of information can benefit both the individuals and the group of the whole using that application, as well as the creators of the application or the service. And in this paradigm, applications that are able to find ways of better serving their users' needs, rather than profiting from them, exploiting them, or extracting value from them, are likely to find themselves successful.
Yeah, I love the stock versus serve analogies there. I'm looking forward to a world where you win when you serve rather than you win when you come up with the best ways to stalk your users. All right, next question. This is from Fabian Furt. If there is a developer or a small team that creates a project and they want to host their own project on the main net for a while to test it with a small portion of users, how do they do it? Do they have to buy a few HoloPorts? David, you want to take that one?
So yeah, the intention is to have Holochain run on consumer hardware, and HoloPorts are a great way to get up and running with a simple turnkey solution. So yes, you could go and buy a few HoloPorts, but if you have an old laptop, you can dig out of the closet, you can download the Holochain binary, or even better, self-updating VirtualBox image, and then you can also start hosting. And then it comes down to your needs. If reliable uptime is a concern for your small network, another option is you could go with a cloud-hosted HoloPort image. Team could start test hosting non-peer visitors and then iron out any issues by using some of their own machines as hosts. And they could then set their rates for hosting their own application to a really, really low level or even free, which allows them to test things out without having to pay other hosts or incur transaction fees. So yes, absolutely. I think I've outlined a few configurations, both on the machines and technology you will need to use to be able to host, how you can configure the network, how you can configure the fees, and enormous flexibility for small teams starting out.
Just to add something really quickly, when you build on Holochain, you can test Holochain between two or multiple installed devices without using Holo, okay? That needs to be really clear. So development teams, when they're creating an application and trying to test it, they can do that internally on a network. They can network any way that they want to connect those devices and test that software. When you install it on Holo, when it gets deployed onto Holo, what you're saying is that you want to make it available to people who are not going to install the Holochain application directly onto one of their devices. It gives you the ability to connect with users that are going to use a web browser and also be part of your application user base and community. That's it. So you can do that by putting it on Holo, and then if you are also a host, because you have any, like as David was saying, you have any type of hardware that's running the Holo software, not the Holochain software now, then you can host it yourselves. You can choose, essentially make it so that you're choosing yourselves as hosts, or you can choose other hosts at various levels based on a set of criteria that you define and say, and that includes how much you want to pay.
Awesome. Thank you both. Next question from the same person. If a developer creates a new app from scratch, how can they get fuel to buy hosting from others? Do they need to pay a fuel broker or buy fuels from fiat money? Any ideas on how to help developers to create more HAPs as soon as possible? David?
Yep, so a developer doesn't need to buy or use HoloFuel in order to run a Holochain application. Their HAP could simply run on the devices of any of the participating users, whether they're phones or laptops, etc. Just building on what Mary was saying, if they want to serve their HAP to non-peers that want to access the application through a web browser, once Holo launches, that is the scenario where they want to be using HoloFuel to pay for the Holochain peers that are hosting their HAP to non-peers. I know that's a bit of technical language, so you've just imagine, to really simplify the scenario, someone who doesn't even know Holochain exists accesses your app from a web browser. A Holochain node or a Holo hosting box is serving that information so that they could access it. And that is when you will be paying for that hosting service in HoloFuel. Now, how do you access the HoloFuel? How do you acquire HoloFuel? You could purchase it from others. Some that hold HoloFuel, and there'll be ways of acquiring HoloFuel that we'll be communicating in the future. You could also have purchased Hot, or could purchase Hot now and then redeem Hot for HoloFuel at an appropriate time. And finally, there's the organic way, which is you could begin by hosting, and when your app is up and running, you could take some of the HoloFuel that you've earned from hosting and redeem it to pay for others hosting your application.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, this question comes from Telegram. Can HoloFuel be earned during the closed alpha test net? Can hosts set their hosting prices during the closed alpha test net? Mary, do you want to take this?
So, yeah, certainly. So right now we're not, we've just seen a lot of interest and participation in testing without any incentive other than like what you get and what you learn from doing it at this point. So the closed alpha is going to be using testnet HoloFuel, and it's not really going to hold, it should not hold any value. It's going to be reset multiple times during alpha testing. So we're going to be sharing more explicitly what all is included in the closed alpha testnet and how that testing will go a little bit later in this month. But at this stage, we are not, it's not real HoloFuel that will be in the closed testnet.
Great, thank you. Next one is from Reddit. I know that an ROI calculator doesn't exist at the moment. This ROI is short for return on investment. So that a calculator doesn't exist at the moment, though I think one will be created in the future. This is their question. So does anyone have a ballpark estimate of the expected return on investment from each model of the HoloPorts in relation to Holochain tokens? Also, I believe that the HoloPorts are very low power, so my electric bill shouldn't take too much of a hit, correct? David, you want to take this?
Sure. So yeah, at the moment, we can't really provide estimates on the HoloPort ROI. We can tell you that HoloPorts and earning of HoloFuel is not analogous to proof of work mining, where there's a predetermined reward the network pays for computing power. With a HoloPort, the fuel you earn is more like Amazon Web Services, where the return on investment or your return depends on how much customers need hosting and how much competition you have in the provision of that hosting service. But we also know that underlying this question is really, what is the incentive for me as a host early on to participate in this network? Right? And our model, and you would have heard potentially and others talk about the HoloFuel currency design. The model is to incentivize the early adopters in what will there be their participation in a long-term productive economy. So at an early stage, if you earn HoloFuel, then over time, we expect the price of HoloFuel to change. It may be up, may be down, but if you're holding HoloFuel for a period of time, as the economy is building, we expect prices to change. Over time, like you've heard us talk about the economic design of the HoloFuel, we expect a very vibrant, productive economy around distributed hosting. And the world market will set a really stable price for the provision of that hosting. So when you're earning HoloFuel very early, the purchasing power of the HoloFuel as it moves into this stable, productive economy will be different. And that's where we see the incentives for the early hosts. It's a bit like, in thinking about it, the early hosts in Airbnb were able to charge more for their houses, but as the productive economy around distributed housing has come into being, the price has dropped to a fairly comparable citywide level. And just jumping onto the electric bill and should it take a hit or not, absolutely correct. Your electric bill shouldn't take too much of a hit. A HoloPort will use as much electricity as a light bulb. So the breakdown of their approximate merely energy use and cost based on the average electricity cost is 12 cents per kilowatts per hour.
Yeah, 12 cents per kilowatt hour is the average US electricity cost. Cool. 10. How can hosts calculate the potential earning for HoloPorts? It's kind of similar to the previous question. Where do I find information on how the hosting earning is calculated? You want to take this one also, David?
Yeah, I'll just jump on it. I would say that, like, building on the response I gave before, if this is the kind of thing you're interested in, we really encourage you to get in touch with the community. So whether it's through a Mattermost channel, whether it's through Telegram, reach out to admins, reach out to other members of the community, and start building the answers for these questions yourselves. Start thinking about adoption of HoloPorts or thinking about building your own HoloPorts. But really, if you're asking this question, what you're really asking is, well, how can I participate in this, what we think is long-term, incredibly new, exciting, productive economy? How can I be one of the early adopters in a way that suits me? So we encourage you to just get involved.
Yeah, and I'll just add a touch there, which is we can't tell you what it's going to be. Any calculation we make would be speculative, right? It may actually be illegal for us to make predictions like that. You'll earn this much. Not allowed to say that sort of thing because we can't predict the future in a market that's going to be dynamic. And to do so would put us in jeopardy legally. All right, 11. I have some questions about the mass adoption of the Holochain network. Will governments and the big institutions want or allow everything to stop flowing through their servers? Don't they prefer to control what we see? Won't big tech institutions want to try and squash Holo so they can keep their big central servers? This is from Reddit. It very much sounds like it's from Reddit. Mary, can you give us your take on that?
Definitely. Well, I just want to say that part of our scenario planning has included a lot of the stops or slowdown measures that could be taken by companies, governments, or other institutions. I mean, we have to be considering some of those things. And as with really any innovative tech, you get to fly under the radar somewhat, in the early days, and we know that. And then, you hit a certain level of adoption, and there's going to be challenges made by those who benefit from the status quo. That's just to be expected. It's sort of like the trajectory of startups. To a degree, we're going to look at those challenges coming in as big wins, because it'll mean that we've actually garnered the influence, the momentum that really requires, kind of that tipping point where people notice you. And it's a tipping point to us that people are moving towards software that's distributed. So that's fantastic. But kind of to go further into what's being asked here, I think the adoption, we actually think that adoption of, or by some of these actual institutions themselves may also happen, right? A good example might be how with GDPR in Europe, because Holochain actually enables a lot of what GDPR is trying to accomplish in a legal way. We do it in an architectural, structural way. So companies might use Holochain, for example, as a gateway into other applications because of this, ensuring that their users are in control of their identities and their own personal information, and then connecting into other apps that aren't necessarily Holochain apps. In a nutshell, we know challenges are going to come. We're planning as much as we can for them. I'm not going to go obviously into all the details of different ones, but our expectation is that these are not going to be insurmountable. Our belief is that we will have answers to them. Some of them are more obvious, and some of them we're going to miss, and we're going to hit some things that are ahas, and that's okay. That's what doing business and making a difference in the world looks like.
Thanks, Mary. I will add just one thing for folks who aren't familiar. GDPR is a specific regulation in Europe having to do with data privacy. It's the general data privacy regulation. And it's led to some shifts worldwide because the internet is global. You've probably had to click through some agreement things over the last year having to do with updated terms of service on a whole bunch of different websites or companies. That all had to do with GDPR. It's shifted the landscape, the legal landscape, with regard to how companies hold on to information. And it's shifting that in a way that more closely aligns with some of the stuff that we're doing with Holochain. Not that we're perfectly aligned, or not that we were driven by that in any way. It just happens to, because it's trying to protect users, and so are we, we're sort of pointed in the same direction. Next question. How does Holochain address the problems of Sybil attacks, 51% attacks, and malicious nodes? Would the team conduct testing or provide a demonstration video to prove that Holochain is resistant to those various attacks? I'll take this one. For those who aren't familiar, Sybil attacks have to do with an ability to spin up fake nodes, like imaginary users, lots of them, and then build some kind of positive reputation or attack a system. Does this, hey, are you able to fraudulently establish reputation in some way? 51% attacks are specific to blockchain. They're really relevant for architectures that use a central ledger, a la blockchain. With Holochain, majority control, meaning 51% control over the network, can only ever be successful in fooling some people some of the time, and only in limited ways. Marking bad data as good, marking good data as bad, failing to produce or store entries in our shared storage that you're responsible for, controlling new participants' view of the DHT. None of these have the ability to totally corrupt the experience of honest agents. They just force them to do more work to get assurances of trustworthiness. Although controlling new participants' views of the distributed hash table or our shared storage could be quite effective depending on how a particular app is designed. Sybil attacks, the consequences of Sybil attacks are different for every DHT network or Holochain style network. For some, guarantees of true personhood are important but easy to do. Consider a Holochain-based next door, where you have to submit a picture of yourself standing in front of your door, holding a paper that has the last 10 digits of your public key. Your peers can see the photo, check it against your actual public key, and grant you access. But for others, the consequences of improperly designed identity verification could be catastrophic, either because they enable the kinds of majority disruption described above, or because they allow phishing attacks or other sorts of frauds. With regard to malicious nodes, it depends on the kind of malice. For producing invalid data or spurious warrants, warrants are our mechanism for letting other people know, hey, somebody's done something bad. So spurious warrants would be, you know, Mary has done something that's totally appropriate, totally fine, and I'm going, she's behaving badly, right? So that would be me acting malicious. In those kinds of instances, honest nodes would put the bad actors into their block lists. They would note for themselves, hey, this person's been acting not nice, they're not playing by the rules. For all the kinds of mischief that I described under majority attacks, which also pertain to small groups of bad actors. The difference is scale of impact, not type of impact. I'm guessing that a combination of the self-healing properties of a distributed hash table will filter out all that stuff. So in the short term, we'll employ defenses that are established by, this is for Holo, we will employ defenses that are established by some Cloudflare style infrastructure for some types of malicious node attacks. In the long term, as we decentralize some proxying processes, we'll employ methods to efficiently scan traffic flowing through those nodes for known bad actors, malicious patterns, etc. Each node will also have its own defenses, such as temporary bans on DDoS or distributed denial of service attacker IP addresses. So that's a lot of technical stuff. This was a fairly technical question, but I want to make clear a couple of things. Holochain is designed to be a peer-to-peer thing, where the members of that community are agreeing to sets of rules that they feel comfortable playing by. Those rules should include some things like, hey, how do we deal with bad actors? Holo, the organization, we're not going to take responsibility for taking actions against malicious nodes inside of your community. In fact, we might not even know that your community exists, right, if it's running just as a peer-to-peer thing. But when you are running things through Holo, we may be trying to provide some help in identifying malicious actors. That's sort of a favor that we're attempting to do, but we're not going to take responsibility for managing the integrity of a sovereign community. We don't think it's our role, nor do we think it's right. So again, it's up to the communities that run their distributed hash tables to make decisions about how they actually handle unwanted actions and agents. Any additional comments there? That was, I know, really deep in the weeds. No? Okay. Next question from Telegram and WeChat, Chinese WeChat. Can holoports be connected to the internet wirelessly? David, you want to take this?
Yep, this is a popular one. So the simple answer is it is technically possible, but not a supported configuration on the HoloPort. And we're providing support for Ethernet connections, and this is why. One of the main characteristics and value of hosting is resource availability, uptime. So it makes sense for people who want to host through a HoloPort and have made the investment in the HoloPort and the time and effort to connect and be part of the network, that they have a hardware connection that increases the chance of uptime and availability. If you start connecting with Wi-Fi, you introduce one other risk factor in your connection, and the overall quality of the network will likely degrade due to typical Wi-Fi signal loss. So free to use any setup you want, but we would strongly recommend and most likely only support users connecting through Ethernet.
And for those who aren't super technical, Ethernet means a plug, a cable, not wireless. All right, next, can a normal Android app use Holo hosting? Mary, do you want to try to take this one?
Yeah. So in a nutshell, yes. Our main focus on Holo is really connecting web browsers to Holochain applications. But the code libraries that we're writing to support the work is going to be directly usable on mobile devices, either through a web browser app or as an embedded web view in a native app. It just really depends on how people design and build their applications. We're also planning on building mobile versions of the core Holochain code so that applications can natively interact with the network. That's all part of the plan.
Awesome, thank you. Next question, will Holochain launch a satellite so they can stream payment from cell phones? I'll take this one. We have no plans at present to launch satellites to enable phone payments. In fact, one of the nice things about Holochain-based currencies is that payment systems and other applications can be designed that function well despite network partitions. So you can have just, people in your building, you can do some Bluetooth interaction with them, and then later others in the network can recognize that. So no, we're not planning to launch a satellite network. Next. Next question. IOTA gives me hope that there is an emerging pragmatic awareness of the binary blinders and remedies on the back end. How do you anticipate Holo embracing the ternary renaissance? Okay, this is a super geeky question. For those who are not familiar, this deals with binary ones and zeros and ternary, a different system that has -1, 0, 1. So there's sort of 3 options for a bit. Just to be clear, and IOTA uses ternary. We're not focusing on ternary at present because almost all hardware today that exists in the world and all networking systems are built for binary. We're trying to take a pragmatic approach in most things, and wishing that the world were different than it currently is doesn't make it so. There are some folks who find ternary to be really interesting for mathematical reasons, and certain types of functions are faster or easier, but that's not the world that we live in, so we're not focused on building for that. No, we're not focusing on ternary at present. Okay, next question. For those rare cases when global consensus is necessary, which is an assumption I'm going to point out, but that's how they're framing it. Have you looked into a hash graph-like mechanism, minding their patent, of course, for reaching global consensus in a distributed fashion? No. Nope, we're not doing that. End of story. We challenge that global consensus is necessary. There may be some instances. No, we're not looking to implement a hash graph-like mechanism for those cases. Next question. Do you guys know David Schwartz? David Schwartz is a cryptographer that works with Ripple. Will you be taking Ripple's business away because Holo does it better? David, you want to take this?
Yeah, well, we have quite a few people on our team, and I think a few people on our team are pretty well connected. So maybe someone knows David. I'm not sure, but I don't know him personally. We know that Ripple is narrowly focused on payments. Holo is focused on hosting peer-to-peer applications so that non-peers can interact with them. So yes, we have a crypto counting solution, HoloFuel, that we've designed to foster this hosting ecosystem, and it enables very high volumes of transactions at a very low cost. But I'm not going to make a prediction right now about how Holo might mature and how that might impact Ripple, because our focus is building great tech and an amazing, vibrant Holochain ecosystem, not on figuring out how that might impact other businesses.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, next question. Search engines index and rank websites by IP addresses. If it will be possible to host websites, what IP address will show for these websites on Holochain? Mary, can you take this one?
Okay, just to be clear, I got an answer from one of our developers on this one. So yes, that definitely is, there's gonna be 2 options for Holo. Either way, the base load of the site is gonna be static. It is gonna be, in JavaScript's gonna run connecting to the Holochain network that's gonna download the UI information. The default option is that Holo is gonna host a stub static site. So it will be an IP address owned by holo.org, but app developers can do their own hosting and still include the holo.js. So this is gonna be an option that they will have with their content, and whether or not they want to embed a smaller portion of Holo functionality, in which case it would be their IP address. I'm not sure if all that made sense, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this question and give it over to our developer FAQs and make sure that we get this one written down and included in some of the next documentation.
Thanks, Mary. Next question. How is Holochain going to get adoption going in this project? But how are you going to get everyone on board, especially people who don't even know what blockchain is or anything about Holochain? All right. How are we going to get adoption? Anybody?
mean, I can jump in quickly, and we've talked about that question a few times on the last AMA, and but I'd say if you look just fundamentally at our approach of building Holochain, as Mary described, this framework for distributed applications, and then building Holo on top of Holochain as a way for people to access distributed applications through their web browsers, you can see that we're focused on meeting people, users where they are, and then bringing them towards what we think is going to be a world where, as we talked about earlier, where you're able to use your data better, you're able to have positive and more vibrant and healthy relationships between users and application owners. So our entire focus of how we're expecting the long-term adoption of distributed applications to happen is not by just saying we'll build some fantastic tech and people will come to it, but actually building technology that helps people finds people where they are today and draws them towards something over time. So that would, I'd say that our focus is building technology that connects to where people are today and draws them into applications that make a difference in their lives. I'll just set at that more meta level today's answer, because I think there's enough responses to specifics where we see certain applications, certain industries, and all sorts of things that we expect to drive adoption. We haven't answered the question in that way in the last little while.
Great, thank you. Next question, and we're getting close to the end here. If a user connects to a HAP via browser and Holo, where will the keys be stored? Will the user only be able to connect via that computer? Mary, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so this is really important. It's a great question, actually. So when users connect via a browser, the keys are not going to be stored. They are literally going to be generated every time you log in using a password hashing scheme. So you can log in from a new browser so long as you remember that password. That's really important.
Yeah, and our dev team has been jumping through some hoops, inventing some really interesting tech to make it so that that system is very difficult to attack. More difficult to attack than a normal password-based system might be, in part because people just come up with dumb passwords sometimes. And we're trying to make it harder for folks to guess keys without having to require a lot from users themselves. 25, let's see, things are jumping around on me. Did you already test Holochain on Holoports? Are there any difficulties or major problems? Mary, do you want to take this one as well?
So yes, we've been actually testing prototypes of Holoports for quite a while now, and we're going to be continuing to test them through each of our cycles for our test nets. But we are feeling very good about where we are for the upcoming releases.
Wonderful. And since we're basically running out of time, unless there's another question that either David or Mary are burning to answer.
I haven't looked ahead.
Oh, quick. I'll give you guys just a few seconds to see if there's something that you're like, ooh, that's one I want to take on.
These are getting really technical today. I think we can probably capture a lot of these in some written FAQs a little bit later this week. So
we'll leave them be. Okay, we covered a ton of ground today, including some very technical stuff, some currency-oriented stuff, et cetera, some org-oriented stuff. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up. I just want to say thank you once again. Tremendous gratitude to our community leaders, volunteers, contributors, and organizers. We wouldn't be able to do this without those folks. We are trying to grow an ecosystem, not just an organization. That's a very different way of thinking about growth than most corporate entities out there. And that is very much dependent on the passion and the effort of our community participants of every form. So until next time, thank you very much. Again, I'm Matthew Schutte.
Mary Camacho.
David Atkinson, happy golden pig year.
Quick note, everybody, we're going to be back doing AMAs now every 3 weeks if you've seen the schedule. I don't know if that's been posted anywhere, but I think that's important to say. And in the coming weeks, we're going to be talking a lot on the blog about what is happening with Holo, like how Holo works and what you can expect in the closed testnet.
Wonderful. Until next time, thank you.
Bye, everybody.